Everyone thinks Syndra is all about burst damage, but the truth is, most players aren't losing because they lack damage. They're losing because they waste the one ability that makes the rest of her kit work. This champion doesn't win because you cast everything on cooldown. She wins because you know exactly when to hold your E and when to use it. One stun makes your entire combo guaranteed. One missed E leaves you exposed, punishable, and easy to collapse on. And if you waste it at the wrong time, you don't just lose your damage, you lose control of the entire fight. So in this guide, I'm going to show you exactly how to play Syndra properly, from sphere control, to combos, to build, and real in-game decision making. So no matter the fight, you know when to hold your E and when to take over. Let's get into it. Let's quickly lock in what Syndra brings to the table. Syndra can delete squishy targets extremely quickly once she lands her stun and follows up with her full combo. Her E gives her powerful stun threat, pick potential, and self-peel, and once upgraded, it becomes wider and slows enemies hit. Syndra becomes significantly stronger as the game progresses, gaining powerful passive upgrades and a deadly execute on her ultimate. Her AoE Q, ability to grab minions and monsters with W, and ability to shove waves with E gives her rare control over how waves are cleared, held, or manipulated. Her dark spheres shape her stun angles, ultimate damage, zoning, and combos, making sphere placement central to everything she does. But that power comes with real risks, so let's break down her weaknesses. Syndra can be killed extremely quickly if she gets caught out of position or focused during fights. Even though she can move while using Q and W, Syndra has no dash, blink, speed up, or reliable escape tool. Most of Syndra's pressure depends on landing her abilities, especially her stun, because that's what makes the rest of her combo much easier to follow up. Champions with strong engage can quickly close the gap and punish Syndra before she has time to create space or protect herself. To get maximum value, Syndra needs proper sphere placement, stun angles, and combo timing instead of just throwing abilities randomly. Those are Syndra's biggest strengths and weaknesses overall. Syndra's passive is what gives her kit its scaling identity. As Syndra plays the game, she collects Splinters of Wrath by damaging enemy champions, leveling her abilities, and killing cannon minions. These splinters upgrade her abilities throughout the game, which means Syndra gets stronger not just from items, but from naturally stacking her passive. At 40 splinters, her Q can hold 2 charges. At 60 splinters, her W deals bonus true damage. At 80 splinters, her E becomes wider and adds a strong slow. At 100 splinters, her ultimate can execute low health enemies. And at 120 splinters, Syndra gains bonus ability power, turning her into an even stronger late game burst mage. The longer the game goes, the more complete her kit becomes. Master Syndra's Q and you've mastered the foundation of her entire kit. You place a dark sphere on the ground, dealing AoE damage after a short delay. But this is not just a basic poke spell. Your Q creates the sphere that powers almost everything Syndra wants to do. Your W, your E stun, and your ultimate damage all become stronger when your Q usage is clean. A common mistake is using Q randomly just because the cooldown and mana costs are low. Instead, you want to time Q when enemies are last hitting, walking forward, stuck in animations, or forced to move in a predictable direction. Because it's cheap, spammable, and AoE, Q is one of your main tools for controlling the wave and clearing minions. At 40 splinters, Dark Sphere upgrades and lets Syndra store 2 Q charges. This is a huge power spike because it increases her damage output and gives her more spheres to turn into stuns. Syndra's W is one of the most unique basic abilities in the entire game. You grab a Dark Sphere, enemy minion, or non-epic monster, then throw it at a target area, dealing damage and slowing enemies hit. Most of the time you'll be using this on your Q spheres because it gives you a reliable target to throw and keeps your combos simple. But the fun part is how many strange uses this ability has. You can grab minions to move them into better positions and help set up a freeze. You can grab jungle monsters to disrupt enemy camps, or grab Scuttle Crab to help your jungler fight for control. And against certain champions, you can even grab their summon minions, like Tibbers or Daisy, and throw them completely out of the fight. When you throw the target into fog or brush, it also gives vision, making it a great way to check dangerous areas. At 60 splinters, Force of Will upgrades and deals bonus true damage, giving Syndra even more burst. This ability decides whether Syndra controls the fight, or gets jumped on and dies. Syndra pushes enemies and dark spheres away from her, dealing damage. If a pushed sphere hits an enemy, they become stunned. Scatter the Weak is Syndra's main peel tool, her biggest kill threat, and her best way to make picks around the map. A common mistake is throwing E randomly just for poke, but against mobile champions, it's often better to hold it until they dash or blink first. Once Scatter the Weak is down, Syndra becomes much easier to punish because she loses her best way to stop engages. If your sphere stun hits an enemy in fog or brush, it also reveals them during the stun, making it useful for catching hidden targets safely. At 80 splinters, this ability upgrades, becoming wider and slowing enemies hit. This makes Syndra's peel, pick potential, and teamfight control even harder to deal with. This is the ability that makes Syndra feel completely broken, but only if you set it up correctly. Syndra locks onto an enemy champion and launches her dark spheres at them, dealing damage for each sphere that hits. The more spheres you have prepared, the harder this ability hits. That's why Unleashed Power is usually strongest as a finisher, not something you throw out at the start of the fight. If you use your Qs first, then press R once the enemy is already low, Syndra can delete targets before they have time to react. But this ultimate is not only for finishing kills. After you use R, the spheres land around the target, which means you can follow up with E and threaten huge multi-target stuns in teamfights. At 100 splinters, Unleash Power upgrades and executes enemies below 15% max health. So once this upgrade is unlocked, Syndra becomes even more terrifying because low health targets are no longer allowed to survive. For ability order, max Q first. This is Syndra's main poke, wave clear, and the ability that sets up the rest of her kit. Max W second for more damage, a stronger slow, and lower cooldown. Then max E last because Scatter the Weak is mainly used for utility and leveling it does not reduce the cooldown. And of course, level your ultimate whenever it's available. This is the combo every Syndra player needs to master first. You place Q, then use E to knock the sphere through the enemy and stun them. This might look simple, but most of Syndra's real combos are built around this one interaction. You can start using this as early as level 2, which means Syndra already has the kill pressure, jungle setup, and defensive peel very early in the lane. The key is understanding that Q does not always need to hit for damage. Sometimes Q is just there to create the sphere, so E can turn into a stun. If you master QE, every other Syndra combo feels much easier to understand. This is Syndra's main trade combo. If the enemy is already in range, you want to place Q directly on top of them, then instantly use E to knock the sphere through them and stun. This gives you the Q damage, the E damage, and then sets them up for a W follow-up. But from longer range, you may have to place Q in front of you instead, then use E to push the sphere into the enemy. In that case, your Q might not deal damage, but it still creates the sphere needed to land the stun. After the stun connects, follow up with W for extra damage, and if they're still in range, finish with an auto attack. Q, E, W auto. This combo uses W first to slow the enemy before going for your QE stun. You can pick up a minion, monster, or sphere with W. The main goal is simply to land the slow. Once W hits, the enemy becomes much easier to follow up on, because the slow makes your Q and E much harder to dodge. This works best against immobile champions because they don't have dashes or blinks to instantly escape after getting slowed. If they're still in range after the stun, finish with an auto attack. The key idea is to treat this like a quick check. If W lands, follow up with Q and E. If W misses, don't force the combo, just back off and wait for your cooldowns. W, Q, E, auto. This is Syndra's main kill combo. You start with Q and E to stun the target, then follow up with W while they're locked down. Once they're low enough or stuck in the combo, use R to finish them. If possible, try to add another Q before using your ultimate, or fight when you already have extra spheres on the ground. The more spheres Syndra has prepared, the harder her ultimate can hit. The idea is simple: stun first, layer your damage, then use R when they can't escape or survive the burst. Q, E, W, R. This is one of Syndra's strongest teamfight combos. Instead of only using your ultimate to burst one target, you can use R first, then E the spheres afterwards to create a massive stun threat. This is especially powerful in group fights, choke points, river fights, and objective fights where enemies are standing close together. The ultimate drops multiple spheres around the target, and then Scatter the Weak can turn those spheres into a wide teamfight stun. This combo makes your stun much harder to dodge. Instead of only using one QE, you can pick up an existing sphere with W, throw it near one side of the enemy, then place Q on the other side before pressing E. Now instead of sending one sphere forward, you're sending two. This covers a much wider angle and you can double your chance of landing the stun. If you spread the spheres correctly, this can make your E feel almost guaranteed. W, W, Q, E. Those are Syndra's core combos. Lock them in. For runes, First Strike is the main page. Syndra has strong range, strong burst, and a lot of her trades can start from long distances with Q, E, or a full stun combo. Because of this, First Strike fits her really well. It gives her extra damage, extra gold, and helps her reach her item spikes faster, which is exactly what Syndra wants as a scaling burst mage. For minor runes, cashback is the standard option for extra scaling value. Magical footwear can be used if you're in lane where you don't need early boots, but if you need movement speed early, don't lock yourself out of buying them. Triple Tonic is especially good on Syndra because the level 9 Elixir of Skill gives you an extra skill point, which also helps you gain extra splinters earlier. If you need more sustain in a difficult lane, you can take Biscuit Delivery instead. Then finish the page with Cosmic Insight for lower summoner spell and item cooldowns. For secondary runes, Mana Flow Band and Transcendence are the default. Mana Flow helps with mana, and Transcendence gives ability haste, which Syndra always wants. Against long poke champions who can easily hit you first and deny your first strike, you can take Arcane Comment instead. This is better into lanes where First Strike is too hard to activate reliably, because Comet gives you consistent poke damage without being wasted just because the enemy tagged you first. With Arcane Comment, take Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch. Scorch gives stronger lane pressure, but if the game looks slower and you want more scaling, Gathering Storm is also fine. For secondary page with Comment, go Inspiration with Triple Tonic and Cosmic Insight. You can also take Precision secondary with Legend Haste and Cut Down against tankier teams, where you need more spell time and more damage against high health targets. And Precision works with both First Strike and Comet. Overall, First Strike is your default scaling page. Arcane Comment is a safer poke mage when First Strike is too easy for the enemy to deny. For items, you'll start every lane with Doran's Ring and 2 health pots. After that, Syndra has 2 main build paths. The first is the Burst build. This is usually Luden's Echo, Sorcerer's Shoes, and then Shadow Flame or Storm Surge. Luden's is the standard Burst Mage item. It gives Syndra damage, mana, ability haste, and better burst when she lands a combo. Then Sorcerer's Shoes gives you magic penetration, which makes your burst hit much harder. After that, Shadow Flame is the more consistent damage option, while Storm Surge gives you more pick and burst potential when you're trying to delete squishier targets. This is the build you want when the enemy team is mostly squishy, and your job is to land a stun, burst someone out, and create picks. The second build is the ability haste build. This is usually Blackfire Torch, Ionian Boots, and Cosmic Drive. This build gives you more spell uptime, more movement speed, and works better in longer fights when you're casting multiple rotations instead of looking for one big burst combo. This is better when fights are slower, enemies are harder to kill instantly, or when you need to keep throwing out Qs, Ws, and Es throughout the fight. After your core build, your items become more flexible. Rabadon's Death Cap is your biggest AP scaling item and one of Syndra's strongest power spikes if you have the gold for it. Sonya's Hourglass is your main defensive item against bursts, assassins, dive threats, or anything that can jump onto you. Banshee's Veil is another defensive option, especially against dangerous crowd control pick tools or long range abilities that can catch you before a fight starts. Void Staff is a simple magic penetration option once enemies start building a lot of magic resistance. Crypt Bloom is another strong magic penetration option, especially if you also want the extra ability haste and the healing effects for teamfights. Hextech Rocket Belt is more situational, but it can be useful when you need an extra dash to reposition, escape specific threats, or get closer to mobile targets. Boost of Swiftness is your last boot choice when enemy slows are becoming a major problem. So to keep it simple, go Luden's when you want burst and pick threat. Go Blackfire Torch when you want more ability haste, more uptime, and better extended fights. Then adapt your later items based on whether you need damage penetration or defensive safety. Flash is mandatory on Syndra. It gives you reliable escape, lets you finish kills, and can also help you create picks from further away with your stuns or burst combo. For your second spell, Teleport is the safest and most recommended option. Syndra usually wants a stable early game where she can farm, scale, and reach her item power spikes. Teleport helps cover bad trades, lets you reset without losing too much tempo, and becomes even more valuable later when you need to clear side waves and still join your team. Ghost is another strong option, especially into team comps where repositioning matters. Since Syndra has no real mobility, Ghost can help you kite, chase, escape, and stay at safer distance during extended fights. Ignite gives you much more early lane pressure. It can help you snowball, punish healing champions, or win lanes where kill pressure really matters. But compared to Teleporter Ghost, it usually becomes less useful later in the game. Barrier is the defensive option. It can help against heavy burst threats, long range poke, or champions who can all-in you before you can play the fight. Overall, if you're unsure, stick to Teleport. Ignite and Barrier can be good in specific lanes, but they don't give the same mid to late game value as Teleport or Ghost. Syndra's early game is not about forcing kills immediately. It's about farming cleanly, scaling through splinters, and building pressure through poke. Level 1 onwards, look to Q-poke enemies whenever they walk up to last hit. You want to slowly chip them down over time while keeping your main focus on farming. Your number one priority is still farm. Syndra wants levels, gold, items, and splinters of wrath. At level 2 you can take E even though you max W second later. This gives you immediate safety and pressure. If a melee champ jumps on you, you can push them away or stun them with QE. Most of your laning phase is about landing 2 ability hits on the enemy champion, then backing off. Simple trades like Q into E or Q into W help you stack your passive without overcommitting. A good early goal is reaching your first upgrade around level 7, or at least by level 8, which means around 40 splinters. Syndra can look for kills, but usually only after the enemy has already been chunked low. Don't greed too early. If your jungler is nearby, Syndra is strong in river fights. Push the wave when needed, move first when you can, and look for long range stuns from different angles. Syndra is not a natural roamer like assassins. Most of the time you want to stay mid, farm well, poke your laner, stack splinters, and scale into your first item spike. Once you reach 1 to 2 items, Syndra becomes a real burst threat. At this point, any squishy champion caught by your stun can usually be chunked or killed very quickly. This is where you want to start looking for picks, especially around fog of war, river entrances, jungle corridors, and objective setups. Even though your damage is much higher now, you still need to keep farming. Collecting waves, keep scaling your splinters, and keep working towards your next item spike. You can side lane when there's free farm, but don't push too far by yourself. Syndra is not trying to permanently split push. You usually want to clear the wave, then rotate back towards your team. This is also where Syndra becomes much stronger in skirmishes. Your Q spam, long range stun, and burst damage can completely decide fights around dragons, herald, baron, or jungle picks. But positioning is still everything. If assassins, divers, or high mobility champions reach you, you can get caught out very quickly. Team fighting on Syndra is mostly about spacing and control. The longer the fights play out, the better. Stay at range, hover in and out, and pressure enemies with Q poke. Your main threat is scatter the weak. Look for stuns on anyone who steps too far forward, especially around choke points, objectives, or grouped enemies. If you catch one target, your team can usually collapse quickly. And if enemies stand together, one good E can become a multi-stun and start the fight instantly. You can use your ultimate to burst a squishy champion, or cast it early to create more spheres before scattering them for a bigger stun setup. But positioning matters more than anything. If assassins or divers reach you, you die very quickly, so keep your distance, stay behind your front line, and peel for your carries when needed. The longer Syndra stays alive, the more she can spam Q, control space, and win fights from range. Late game, most of the same rules still apply, but Syndra is much more threatening. Stay with your team, control space from range, and keep looking for picks with your stun. Spam Q so you always have 2 to 3 spheres ready for a full burst combo. You should usually have one defensive item like Zhonya's or Banshees, because one mistake can lose the game. But enemies will also have tools like Zhonya's, Banshees, or Guardian Angel, so bursting targets can be harder. Don't walk into dark areas alone, clear waves when needed, and use your range to poke, stun, peel, and control fights safely. This is one of Syndra's strongest mechanics when used correctly. If you perform the QE combo inside a wall, the sphere can travel through the wall and extend the stun range much further than normal. Syndra's normal QE combo already has long range, but this lets Syndra hit enemies from extremely long distances, especially over the thicker walls. You usually won't be close enough to follow up with your own damage, but that's not always the point. If your teammate is chasing someone, this can be one of the best long-range assist tools in Syndra's entire kit. This is one of Syndra's most surprising pick mechanics. It works when a sphere is already on the ground and lined up with your target. You cast E, then instantly flash to close distance and launch the sphere. This can catch enemies completely off guard, since they don't expect the sudden flash. It can also be used to change the angle when enemies are not lined up properly. Because flash is so important on Syndra, only use this for important combos, shutdowns, or fight-winning stuns. E, instantly flash. Experienced Syndra players don't wait for fights to start. They prepare spheres before the fight begins. Once you have enough mana, start placing Qs before skirmishes, teamfights, or when you think someone might jump on you. Having 1 or 2 spheres already on the ground can massively increase your burst and be the difference between barely surviving and instantly deleting someone. Just don't overdo this too early, but in mid and late game, get into the habit of preloading spheres before fights. Good Syndra players take advantage of one simple mechanic. Both Q and W can be used while moving. This is important because Syndra is still an immobile mage, but these spells let her deal damage without standing still. You can poke in lane while dodging skill shots, chase enemies while placing spheres, or damage someone chasing you without stopping your movement. It makes Syndra feel much smoother, and it's one of the small habits that separate clean Syndra players from clunky ones. Against tanky or sustain heavy champions, you don't always need to waste your full combo. Sometimes the goal is simply to hit 2 abilities, claim your splinters, then back off. For example, you can use QE or QW to trigger your passive without dumping every cooldown into a champion who is just going to tank and heal through the damage. This is especially useful into champions like Galio, where over-trading can quickly drain your mana without actually threatening a kill. So instead of forcing full damage every time, look for short 2 trade spells, get your splinters, then wait until your passive can be triggered again. Don't get killed by making this Syndra mistake. Syndra E can reveal enemies if it actually hits them inside a brush, but if it misses, it does not reveal the area. This means in bigger brushes, an enemy could still be hiding there even if your E hits nothing. So don't assume a brush is safe just because your stun missed. If you need to check a brush more reliably, W is much safer because it reveals vision whether it hits someone or not. This Syndra mechanic is so strong it almost feels unfair. After 20 minutes, Rift Scuttler becomes Voidborn Scuttler, and when it dies, it sends out a massive vision wave that reveals enemy champions, wards, and a huge surrounding area. If the Voidborn Scuttle is low enough, Syndra can use W to pick it up, then throw it towards the enemy jungle and finish it there. This can give your team insane late game vision around Baron, Dragon, or Elder, and can completely expose the enemy team before a fight starts. Sometimes that one piece of vision can be the difference between winning the game and walking blind into a throw. If you have vision, you can pick enemy jungle camps while the enemy is doing them, drag them away and force the camp to reset, or even take one yourself. This can make the enemy jungler waste valuable time. But one important warning, only use this against the enemy team. Syndra has been infamously used to grief allied junglers by dragging their camps away, and Riot has been cracking down much harder on disruptive gameplay. So use this mechanic to punish the enemy jungler, never your own team. Syndra can literally throw her teammate a way out. Because W can pick up enemy minions and jungle monsters, you can move them into useful position for allies who need a target to dash, jump, or skill shot onto. You can also use the same idea against enemies by moving away minions or camps they were trying to escape through. Cannon waves take a long time to clear early game, but not for Syndra. If you need to clear quickly, kill the melee and ranged minions first, then pick up the cannon with W and drag it under your tower. This lets your tower help finish the cannon faster, saving you a lot of time. Smart Syndra players don't just play around walls, they abuse them. Normally, W has a clear cast range, but when you throw a sphere over certain walls, it can travel much further than expected. This is useful for checking brushes from safer distance, poking enemies over terrain, or finishing low health targets who think they're out of range. It's not a game-breaking mechanic, but good Syndra players use walls to squeeze extra range and safety out of their W. Be careful where you drop enemy minions with Syndra W. If you pick up an enemy minion and throw it into Fog of War or a brush, or your side of the map, you can accidentally give the enemy team vision of that area. This means you might think you're just moving a minion, but you're actually helping the team see information they shouldn't have. So when using W on enemy minions, don't drag them into areas where enemy vision could actually hurt you. There's one rare Syndra W bug that can completely ruin a fight. sometimes after picking up something with W, the ability can bug out and stop you from throwing it. Although it's not consistent to replicate it, it seems to happen around weird timing, heavy button spam, or getting interrupted while using W. When it happens, don't panic and don't waste more cooldowns trying to fix it. You usually just want to accept that W is broken for that moment, wait for the cooldown to reset, and keep playing the fight. It may happen once in 100 games, or twice in the same game. As long as you keep playing Syndra, it will eventually happen. Before we get into specific matchups, understand that Syndra's main goal in almost every lane is simple: farm well, poke when it's safe, and collect splinters without taking bad trades. Some lanes make this very easy, some lanes make it much harder. But you don't need to force random kills early. If you can farm safely, hit poke when enemies walk too close, and avoid unnecessary deaths, you're already doing a job. Syndra scales extremely well, so even in harder lanes, you can still become a huge threat later if you stay patient and play the lane correctly. In easier matchups, Syndra usually has more freedom to control the lane, poke consistently, and punish enemies whenever they walk too far forward. These are often ranged champions who can still play inside your threat range, so if they step too close, you can hit them with Q, look for stun angles, and slow pressure them out of lane. These matchups are also easier for collecting splinters, because you can farm and poke without being under constant threat. You still don't want to waste your cooldowns randomly, but these lanes usually give Syndra more control, more poke windows, and more chances to build a lead. Medium matchups are usually more skill based. They are often champions with longer range poke, strong skill shots, or enough threat to punish you if you position badly. In these lanes, Syndra doesn't always get to freely dominate poke. A lot of the lane comes down to spacing, dodging abilities, and landing your own skill shots better than the enemy lands theirs. If you hit more Qs, find good stun angles, and avoid eating unnecessary poke, you can take over the lane. But if you miss too many abilities, walk too far forward, or greed too hard for splinters, these champions can punish you quickly. So focus on farming cleanly, trading when it makes sense, and winning the lane through better spacing and better cooldown usage. Hard matchups are the lanes where Syndra has much less room for error. These are usually champions with dashes, blinks, strong all-in threat, or ways to avoid your stun completely. Against these champions, you usually want to use E more defensively instead of aggressively. Don't just throw out stun randomly, because if they dodge it or wait it out, you can become very easy to punish. A lot of the time you want to hold E until they actually commit with their dash or engage, then you can use it to peel them off, create space, and survive the trade. In these lanes, your goal usually isn't to hard dominate early. It's to farm safely, avoid bad deaths, manage the wave carefully, and punish them only when they waste their key cooldowns. Freezing the wave can be very useful because it makes it harder for the enemy champion to run you down, and you also need to respect their roams. A lot of their danger doesn't just come from the lane itself, it comes from them leaving vision, hiding in fog, or catching you from brushes or river angles. So ward properly, ping when they move, and don't follow blindly into dark areas. Don't stress if some lanes feel difficult early on. Syndra doesn't need to win every matchup immediately. She just needs to farm well, collect splinters when it's safe, and avoid giving the enemy free kills. If you stay patient, respect dangerous cooldowns, and play around your range properly, you'll still scale into one of the strongest control mages in the game. And if you want more detailed help against specific matchups, check out my complete mid lane matchup guide, where I break down how to lane against every major mid matchup. Even though this is mainly a mid lane guide, Syndra is also completely viable as an AP bot lane carry. This means you're still the farming carry, but instead of playing her mid, you can take her bot lane as your team's AP damage source. This can be especially useful when the rest of your team is too AD heavy, because Syndra gives your team strong magic damage, burst, pick threat, and late game scaling. For builds, you can use the same builds from the build section. The same item paths still apply. For summoner spells, heal becomes a more realistic option bot lane, because now you actually have another teammate next to you. But if your support already takes heal, or you prefer the other summoner spells, you can still stick with those instead. In terms of gameplay, bot lane Syndra is mostly the same. You want to farm, poke when you can, and look for moments where enemies walk too far forward. The big difference is that the bot lane gives you way more chain CC potential. If your support lands CC first, you can chain your stun on top of it, and if Syndra lands the stun first, your support can follow after. This makes her very good at setting up kills, forcing summoners, and creating easy gank setups for your jungler. It can also feel way more action-packed than mid lane, because there's more champions and more opportunities to punish mistakes. But the dangers are still the same. Syndra is still squishy, she still doesn't have many escapes, and bot lane is a longer lane, so you have to respect the jungler pressure even more. ward properly, don't push too far when you don't know where the enemy jungler is, and if the map is dark, play more safely until you have more information again. And one final thing to remember, because you're playing bot lane, your role quest can eventually move your boots out of your normal item slots. That means in very late game situations, you can actually fit another full item while keeping boots. So yes, Syndra bot isn't some troll off-role pick. She's a real carry option, especially when your team needs magic damage. Syndra is all about clean fundamentals. Farm well, space properly, land your skill shots, and don't waste your stun. If you do that, you'll scale into a huge threat every game. If this guide helped, consider subscribing for more champion guides like this. I'm Zeus, and I'll see you in the next one.